Hello and welcome back to another Modeling on the Fly episode where we continue to model our AT-AT Walker-like vehicle from Star Wars Empire Strikes Back. Now, in the last video, we had worked on the rear troop area. We got some nice general shapes down there, so that's all starting to look pretty good. Could use some more detailing, but we're going to kind of make a detailing pass a little later. In this video, I want to switch things up a bit and start working on the head. Now, before we really get into that, I just want to point a few things out about the head, and I have a whole bunch of pictures available here. Our initial shape that we created kind of as a rough guide to help us out is pretty much on the ball in terms of general shape, but there are some things you need to be aware of. And by that, I mean that the straight lines of this shape can be a little misleading. You can kind of see them here. That's a nice straight line. In fact, if I use my pen, I can point those out a little more smoothly. So boom, that's straight. You can kind of imagine the straight line up here at the front and a nice straight line coming back here. However, toward the back of the head, if you look really closely, this line back here has got a very gentle curve to it. So we're going to keep that in mind. And you can see it again mimicked here. So there's a nice curve right back there, but it's straight up on the front. So there's a lot of geometric shapes, but you might get misled into making everything really straight when it's not really that way. Now, on the good side of things, it's not really a big deal that this is curved. We've got these nice geometric edges that are carved away on the inside of this plate, which should give us some anchors from which we can pull up some edges to make a nice gentle curvature there. So I'm not too worried about that. In this video, what I want to do is get the general shape of the head in place, kind of build this initial framework, and start to kind of work from there to create the entire head itself. Now, another thing, I just kind of like to give you my methodology before we really get going here. A lot of what you see here is plates built upon a general framework. And I know that kind of sounds funny when you say it, but if you take a look here, if you think of the overall shape of this head as an underlying structure, like a great big box, kind of a trapezoidally shaped box, you can imagine there's a plate here, there's this big circular plate here, even this funny little extrusion at the front can be thought of as a piece that was sort of welded onto the front of this thing. You have a plate added on here and so on and so forth. So that's how I'm going to build it. We're going to build this kind of one piece at a time, starting with the lowermost object and kind of working our way out, stacking objects on top of it. And that'll help give that sort of greebled, very Star Wars-y like effect. So let's start off by framing up on this thing. And the first thing I'm going to do is hit the 4 key to go over to polygons, and I'm going to delete out this polygon here on the bottom. And the reason I'm doing that is that if you look right here, and there's kind of like some walls to this box, but the underside of it kind of indents inward. And we can see that in other pictures. You can kind of get an idea of it here. Here you can see that the underside of the head sort of recedes up inward a little bit. Like these sides sort of come down around the outside of it. There's another shot I have right over here. There you go. Where you can see the underside is really kind of a plate that's recessed inward. So we'll create that a little bit later. For now, we're just going to worry about the overall shape. We're also going to take out this plate. And if we take a look, let me take a look through some of my pictures here. We have the head, the main body. There's a specific I think, yeah, this one. Here we go. You can see that this back wall is also a bit recessed inward. So what we're going to really focus on here are the plates that make up the left wall, the top, and the front of this thing. We're going to treat those all as if they were one piece. Okay, so moving around to the front, let's go ahead and begin the modeling process. If we take a look at our various pictures, we can see there's a couple of indentations here. And there's a lot of different ways you can think of this. You could, if you dig back through the pictures, here's a really good one. You could picture this as one great big flat spot, and then this little central extrusion, it's almost like a center console in a car, is just kind of bolted onto that. So that's the way we're going to model it. So for starters, what I'm going to do is grab the cut tool. Let me also press F4 and get some, sorry, I have some pages here I need to get out of my way. Let's grab the Mighty Cut tool. And I'm just going to make a split. I need to turn off snapping. Turn off snapping, thank you. All the way across the front, like so. Now, I need that to be nice and flat, and there's a couple of different ways we could do that. One way, like everything in Max, there's probably like 20 ways to do everything. We're going to grab this edge, switch over to vertex mode. Now, when I said grab this edge, what I meant was switch on edge constraints. So now, as I move this vertex, you'll see that we are indeed sliding along the edge. While I'm moving it in the z-axis, I'm going to tap the S key and then drag over here to this vertex, and that keeps these nice and flat toward each other. Now, let's jump over to edges, and I can take this entire edge and slide it up and down a little bit. So we'll pull it down just a hair. Be really careful how we do that. Let me switch off snapping, and I'm going to deselect this edge. I just want to move the front one here. It's probably right about there. Take a look at our picture. We can kind of get a verification of that. So now what I'm going to do is make another cut. Just goes from here straight across, and then let's just go ahead and run this all the way around to the back of the head. We can worry about the exact placement of the vertices a little bit later. Right now it's not so important. We'll jump over to faces, turn off the cut tool, grab this face, and we can just delete it out. So we have our little indentation there at the front that we can work from. Okay, so now if we consider that to be the outermost shape of the box, we can now start pulling back a surface to create the recessed area underneath the head. So let's jump back over to edges. I want to try something real quick. Let's grab these three guys. So let's see, you, and you. And what I'm going to do is hold down shift and just drag backwards, and it's not going to work because I still have edge constraints on. And we'll try it again with edge constraints off. There we go. So that automatically starts to create the recessed area. It's just going to take a little bit of editing to get everything all back to where it should be. So for that, let's just grab these two edges. We'll slide them out. Actually, we could just pull them back toward this corner. That'll help get things kind of started anyway. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect. But let's go ahead and grab vertices, and we'll turn on target welding. And I'll just snap that over like so. That's no longer perfectly flat, but that's nothing that a planer eyes wouldn't fix just a little bit later. For the time being, I'm not going to stress too much about it. So let's just focus on some of the plates that exist up here toward the front, little decorations and whatnot. Also, before we get too far along, let's also consider taking this leading edge here, this outer edge, let's see, these guys here, probably here and here as well. And not to make things too complicated on ourselves a little later, shouldn't be too bad though, I want to chamfer these. But considering it just a little bit further, I'm going to do it in kind of a different way. We're not going to chamfer just yet. First thing I'm going to do is jump over to vertices, and sometimes I do this, sometimes I go back and forth. I have this great idea, and then it's just like, no, let's not do that. Alright, now, do we have angle snapping on? It's so much nicer to use this tool with angle snapping. And I'm going to jump to the side view. I'm so used to Maya, which follows the location of your mouse, and you don't have to click a viewport when you're moving stuff around. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm kind of defining how deeply that recession toward the back of the head is going to be. So just to kind of bring up the picture, there you go. You can see how this plate at the back of the head sinks in a little bit. With the slice plane here, I'm defining how far back that edge is going to be. So let's say something kind of like that. And before I make my split, let's check in perspective what that's going to split and what it's not. See, there's a problem. So let's turn this off for just a minute. Let's grab this and we'll slide it back like so. Yeah. Sorry, I'm contemplating. I'm thinking quietly and sort of out loud at the same time. It's impressive, isn't it? Let's see. Let's do this a different way. I want these two edges, and I'm just going to shift drag them down a little bit. So that creates a little bit of thickness there. Now, this edge, all by its lonesome, I'm going to shift drag downward as well. Now, it's starting to look a little bit weird, but don't get stressed yet. We haven't done anything that scary yet. We're about to. Let's take a look at our picture again. Now, this whole thing is going to need to taper inward here at the bottom. That's very important. It's kind of an interesting feature, how the angle is kind of beveled off down here at the bottom, and then it flows in down here. So that's something we will have to consider at some point. For now, I'm just going to attach those like so. Let me grab the cut tool. And just split that right across. Grab target weld again. Alright. Now if we switch to borders, we can grab, well, probably not those. I'll just switch back to edges. What I can probably get away with, if I just grab these two, I should be able to run a simple bridge command and fill those in. Okay, now that's a good start, but I still want to go ahead and get the framework in place for the funny little inward angling. So let's go back to the slice plane for a minute. I'm not done with that idea, but we're going to do it in a slightly different way. Let's see here. Let's go to the material editor. Let me grab, make sure I have the right one. Let's grab the side view, and I'm going to render that with DirectX. It'll take a second to fire up, and it'll slow down my undos, which is kind of bad, but okay in this case. I just want to be able to see really well what's going on back here in the background. Now, this is where the image plane says that indentation takes place. We could check on the side, and it pretty much corresponds. You also have to see this cool little indentation here, which isn't going to be shown on any kind of an image plane, where this is all very thick and then tapers down. So we will probably have to make some adjustments to the overall head shape to make that happen. Probably, but until then. So, okay, you can see here it shows this whole thing kind of slanting backward. I wonder if we can get that confirmed anywhere, because I don't really trust these image planes. Yeah, it looks to me like it doesn't really slant backwards so much. So that's okay. That's something we'll just kind of conveniently ignore, this little back slanting feature. All right, now I'm going to pull this forward to, well, this would be one place to split or slice. So we'll put a slice in there. And if we take a look at our pictures, so that will help us right to that point, and then we need to go straight back from there. Okay, let's just see. Well, we also need an anchor for where the whole thing's going to start, so another slice up here would probably be called for. Okay, with that, let's turn the slice plane off. Let's jump back out here to perspective. We're going to need some more slices as well, I'm sure. Take a look at some other pictures, kind of get an idea of the shape down. Some cool differences from left to right. Also, it's funny, it really does depend on which version of the model you're looking at, because on some versions this edge looks really sharp, and on others it's not so sharp. So it depends on who you want to listen to. Okay, so what I'm going to do for the time being, I'm going to grab these three pieces and actually, okay, I just tapped undo, and because I have a DirectX image plane in the background, it takes a second for things to undo. So let's go ahead and turn that off before I forget. There we go. I want these guys. I'm just going to slide, looks like we selected through. I just want to slide these guys out a little bit. So it starts to create that funny change in width. So kind of shade things up, get an idea of where this is going. Excuse me. Okay, so now I'm going to make a split along here to kind of represent this edge, and then we can taper in what's going on down here. As a matter of fact, let me try something else. Let's undo that. I'll make the split first. Yeah, a little bit of back and forth here. It happens. Alright, there's a nice approximate cut for it. Let's double check here in the side view if we can. Press F2 to get rid of all that. It's probably a pretty good start. I'm sure we could get away with going to edge mode. Let's turn on edge constraints and turn off the cut tool. We could probably slide this down just a little bit. Okay. Now back over here in perspective. Let's try this a different way. We need to cut this, so make sure we split across there, because if we don't, this entire face back here on the back is going to get very, very messed up very quickly. Alright, now, I want this face and probably these faces as well, and we're just going to slide these out. We need to turn off edge constraints before we try that. Okay, and then let's switch over to edges. And we'll grab this edge and we'll slide it out as well. And turn this back into a straight line. Okay, let's shade that up. And we're starting to get that kind of general shape down. That sort of extruded area. Okay, now back over here to our image. Let's go ahead and get a start shape, kind of a beginning shape down for this plate here. And something kind of interesting is happening where this shape that we just pulled out is really kind of separated. It's kind of its own thing. So I think what I'd like to do is kind of cut it off of the base shape. But let's take a look at a couple of things before I confirm that. So here, that's kind of unified. And maybe not. Maybe I'm on the right track by leaving it all kind of united. It's hard to say, really. That looks like it indents inward, so I'm kind of glad that we have this indentation taking place, that we'll probably need to run some edges lengthwise and start to shape out the indentation to get sort of that funny arc shape. That's alright. Alright, so let's see here. To start, if we wanted to make this plate, let me turn our image just temporarily back onto DirectX to give us a bit of a more solid guide. And what I'm going to do is start off with a box. Let's go ahead and switch it to Auto Grid. And I'm just going to draw it something like so. Give it a little bit of height. So it's kind of stuck to the side. It's in the general area, but really, in the end, we're going to be... Well, you know what? On second thought, let's nuke the box. Let's just nuke it. I have another idea. Totally different idea. What if we carved this out? What if instead of pulling this the way we are, what if we actually chopped it out? And it's kind of a different take on everything, but I don't know, I'm feeling like it might be the way to go here. And the reason I say that is because we already have an edge up here along the top. We have this row of faces that we could use to pull it out. We can make some cuts in here, and then basically turn the whole thing into an extrusion. Yeah, I think we're going to try that. You could really go either way. It's just kind of the mood I'm in, I suppose. And there's not really much of an argument for which way is better than the other, because it really just depends on how you wanted to model it. Especially with the idea that this is going to be an underlying shape that will be used to create a normal for a much simpler version of the model. It's really kind of up to you how you handle it. So let's put a slice in here. It'll just kind of help us reshape this whole thing. It might even be a good idea to drop in a second slice. That's how it goes sometimes when you do something off the top of your head. Sometimes you kind of know what you're doing and everything just kind of flows like you had it all planned out. And sometimes you kind of make it up as you go. I don't know if any of you have been watching the modeling on the flies from other series. There was one for the Suzuki SV650S motorcycle where I had modeled out the gas tank and then ended up completely destroying it and starting over. It was great. Alright, give me a nice shot of the side of this thing. So what if we wanted to extrude this out? What shapes do we need in place? It looks like we've already got a good start. I still have edge constraints on, which I think I'm going to undo this and switch that off for a moment. Let me try. I don't know how well this is going to work, because I'm always a little bit untrusting of these constraints to a certain degree, but let's just try face constraints. And I'm just going to try shaping this out very generally. I will probably need another split. Let me just grab the cut tool temporarily. Make a nice cut through here. Okay, now, if we jump over here to perspective, and we need to start really cleaning this up. So grab this face. Is it going to snap that edge, or is it going to start getting really wonky on me? Yeah, very wonky. We don't want that. So let's undo that. And I need to turn off that DirectX feature, which was cool for a minute, but if we don't need it, reach in here and switch it off, because you lose a lot of speed on your undos while that's on. Alright, so let's turn on edge constraints for just a moment. Slide this up like so. Slide this up like so. Slide this up again as well. And what I'm doing really is I'm outlining the shape that we need. If we come over here to our image, we have the little tiny lip at the front, then 1, 2, 3 edges, and then straight back. So here we have the lip at the front, 1, 2, 3 edges. So we've got everything we need. We just need to get it all arranged. So a couple of things. While we have edge constraints on, let's slide this up to thin it out a little bit. We can slide this out a little bit. And what we probably will need to do to make this nice and easy for ourselves would be to come back over here and make this back into a DirectX view. Give that a second to update. And we'll close the material editor. Let's jump over here to the side view, thin things out real quick. Now, I'm just going to start slinging some vertices. I'll leave constraints on for this one cut, and it looks like we can leave them on here as well. Now, you can do things like this. Now, notice I have edge constraints on, so what I'm doing is I'll slide this back until this edge intersects at the point where I want the vertex to be, and then I can slide along that edge, and it puts it right into position. So we'll do that again. We'll slide back until the edge corresponds right where I need the vertex to be, and then slide the next one up. And then same thing here. We'll just slide this guy back, and then slide him up. And slide this guy up. And slide this guy up. And I'm just starting to kind of clean up the overall shape a little bit. Now that's a really long triangle right there, which I generally am not a big fan of. And some interesting things going on with the shape. So we're going to pull this upwards a little bit. We'll slide these guys upwards, kind of start straightening out the overall design here. Could probably slide this upwards. You got to remember, this is going to be a straight outwards. Like it just comes straight forward. This doesn't taper at all. It looks like some sort of mount to which the gun will be applied. And somewhere around here, I actually have a picture of it with the gun broken off. I think it came from some model kit. There you go. So right here, the gun's been removed. And you can see how this piece doesn't, in fact, taper. It just goes right into this dome-like piece that we've got to still create. Let's see if we can get a rough of that in by the time this video is over. But the rest of this all kind of indents, so we're getting the pieces in place so that we can make that indentation fairly easily. Now, some of this, isn't lining up quite the way it probably should. So we may need to kind of take a second look at how all of this is indenting down here. Let's just shade everything up real quick. Have a quick look. Probably, I'm sure we'll actually need some edges to help give this the exact form that it needs. Like we'll probably need to run an edge up to here, something like that. So we've got a good start. Let's take a look at some pictures. So a best case scenario would be to chop out this entire surface here, or get an edge along that. Let's come over here. We've almost got one, don't we? So pull that down, excuse me. And we could probably assume that that indentation starts somewhere around here. Might be able to double check that. Yeah, the part where this starts to kind of go underneath, where this whole area starts to push inward, technically away from the camera where we are right now. It all begins right about here. So that's a pretty good spot for this to be. And the indentation pretty much goes straight down. So what we need to do is grab these guys and pull them straight back. So the shape that we have here in the image plane mostly reflects what's going on, from what I can see, but not exactly. Let's see. Now, we need some sort of edge to kind of anchor off where the indentation ends. It looks like we kind of already have one. The question's going to be whether or not it's indented as much as it needs to be. We probably won't know that until we get some sort of a piece in there. It doesn't look like it indents very much right now. Let's just try, kind of on a temporary basis. We can do a few things. One, I want to grab some faces here, 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 and here. And I want to extrude these. And let's go by local normal. Actually, let's try, yeah, by local normal, not by polygon. And that's pretty heavy, so we just want kind of a thin outward pull like so. Now, of course, we mentioned earlier that the top of this will need to be rounded, and that's okay. Pretty easy to do. There's going to be some cleanup of these edges. Goodness gracious. Alright, so I'm just going to split this across to the top, and we'll split this up to here, and like so. And then to keep things kind of nice and neat, kind of noting that there will be some cleanup. Let's grab the slice plane, and I'm going to reset it. Grab rotation, and let's rotate it in Y 90 degrees. Move it back to about here, and do a slice. And move it back to about here, and do another slice. And we'll turn that off, jump back over to perspective. And now we have some edges that we can move in order to get that rounding in place. And it looks like that rounding's pretty subtle. So what I'm going to do, make sure we're not cutting anymore. Let's do it this way. I'm going to grab all four of these, and we're going to pull them up just a little bit. Now I'll deselect the one in front, and we'll pull the rest up just a little bit. Make sure you actually have the handle selected. There you go. I'll pull those up. And then it looks like here we can just pull this guy up a little. Maybe push this guy back down. And it's creating some really gentle rounding right up there on top. Now it hasn't been beveled, hasn't been smoothed out, but yeah, the basis of it is there, and that's always good. And I'm wondering if this whole thing needs to be pulled out just a little bit more. We probably will have to pull it out a bit, but I'm going to try to hold off for just a little while longer. Let me jump over to Vertices, and I'm going to do some things mostly just to keep things nice and neat as far as I'm concerned. So make those edges kind of go into a little bit of curvature before we get to the more straightened edges down here. And that's okay. I think this will do. We could probably get away with jumping over to edges. Let me turn off edge constraints for just a moment. And I want to grab all of these edges here along the inside because that extrusion doesn't pull out evenly when you get to the corners. And what I'm going to do is pull all these guys downward just a little bit in Y. Or Z, I'm sorry. It's a Z, a world in Max, excuse me. And get those a little bit more flattened out. Okay, so back over to our picture. We've got this piece that's going to kind of creep out from underneath and then come over into the big circular shape. So what I'm going to do real quick is let's get that circular shape. We'll come to the side view. And this is going to be interesting. Let's go over to Create, and we'll create a sphere. And we could do a hemisphere. There's a lot of different ways we could do this. Let's just try it like this. I'm going to grab this, pull it out. Now, AutoGrid was on, so you'll notice our sphere has kind of an interesting tilt to it. I'm going to try to use that to my advantage. See how crazy that looked. Actually, it did pretty much exactly what I wanted it to. Okay, so we could start off just by doing some chop on it. We could chop it to right about there. And before we get completely out of the object, let's do this. Let's pull up its detail, let's say to about 42 segments. That kind of rounds things out a little more. And chopping is going to be better than squashing in this case. So if we called it there, it's lining up pretty well. And of course we can resize as we need to. Let's jump back over here to perspective. Let's convert this over to an editable poly. And let's grab vertices. Grab the scale tool, and then we'll set over to local. Actually, what if we set to parent? What's that going to do? Well, not what I want it to. Let's go to use pivot. There we go. There we go. We can just flatten that out. In fact, we may be able to use the front view to a certain degree to kind of help with the overall thickness. Probably somewhere right in here, and of course we can always resize it within reason to get what we need out of it. Alright, let's get out of subobject mode. Let's go to materials, and let's drag that on like so. Let's shade everything up. Deselect. And we've got a good basis to work from. We can see the indentation starting to take place here. That may need to end up being pulled out just a little bit more than it is. But that's okay. There's a couple of things that actually need to be pulled out. I think right now, though, we're at a good spot that we could put this on hold. So we've got a good start to the head. Obviously, some cleanup needs to be done on the direction of certain edges. We're going to have to really work to make this piece start to fit in well. But again, the basic structure is in place. So that is going to wrap things up for this video. I'd like to thank all of the members of 3D Buzz, especially our member sponsors who make videos like this possible. And I will catch you guys on the next episode of Modeling on the Fly.